How's that, McKinley?
Yes, you are now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Psalm 147. Praise the Lord. How good it is to sing praises to our God, for he is gracious, and a song of praise is fitting. The Lord builds up Jerusalem. He gathers the outcasts of Israel. He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. He determines the number of the stars. He gives to all of them their names. Great is our Lord and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure. The Lord lifts up the downtrodden. He casts the wicked to the ground. Sing to the Lord with thanksgiving. Make melody to our God on the lyre. He covers the heavens with clouds, prepares rain for the earth, makes grass grow on the hills. He gives to animals their food and to the young ravens when they cry. His delight is in the strength of the horse, nor his pleasure in the speed of the runner. But the Lord takes pleasure in those who fear him, in those who hope in his steadfast love. So let's begin with prayer. We find it almost obscene to sing such praises when we know that there are innocent who need to be lifted up and wicked who need to be put down. And yet, if we think about it, there has never been a time when it was perfectly fitting to offer our praises. So we do that this morning. We do that mindful that in many parts of the world, people are suffering, but especially in Ukraine. We pray that some way will be found to stop the aggressor and to heal the brokenhearted and to return home those who have been displaced. Bless us now as we continue our discussion today with Dr. Eisenhower. We're glad he's with us. Help us to benefit as much as possible from his presence. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Eisenhower.
Good to be here. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Good. Are you in your office?
My home office, yes, I am.
I see. Now you live in Banning more recently, I think.
No, Beaumont.
Beaumont. You are in
Yes.
Beaumont.
Beaumont. Forrest and I were discussing, talking about the subtle differences between Banning and Beaumont, of which there are zero, I think.
Although the crime, I think, up here is remarkably high. I don't know if you've noticed that. We have an unfortunately high rate of crime up here on the, yeah.
Uh-oh.
So, well,
No, I can't say that I've been noticing that.
okay. Now you recently came home from a high school reunion.
Yes, a high school reunion number 55. So this is the class of 67, East Bakersfield High School. I'm a proud member of East Bakersfield High School, and not every class does this quite so regularly. We have a reunion every 5 years, and I believe there were 85 of our fellow graduates this time, plus a few guests and spouses and what have you. But yes, and a few of us from the high school orchestra. long ago. A few of us got together, rehearsed, and led everyone singing the school fight song and the school alma mater. Though when I was in high school, I played violin in the high school orchestra. Well, this time I haven't touched a violin in 55 years, so I played mandolin. So
Wow.
but we had 3 violin players, keyboard, trumpet, and mandolin, and it was great. It was lots of fun. And yes, high school reunion number 55.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you if you grew up in Bakersfield, but just for a moment, I see that Professor Sabate is here, and I wonder if you might say a word or two about the happenings this evening.
Well, thanks for the invitation, and thanks, Dave, for sending this program to everyone. Yes, last afternoon we made the preparations as far as setting the chairs and the tables and everything, so the program is ready for tonight. It's going to be a concert. We start with gospel, sing-along, and then blues. And as you know, is something that got my enthusiasm because of the contrast that you have set into the prayer this morning between the people that innocent that are suffering from this war. And I thought that we should do something collectively, and with a group of friends, we organized this fundraising concert for the Ukrainian refugees. So anyone that can attend is in Colton, and the address is in the invitation. And I think it's going to be a fun activity with, I would think, a good purpose. So everybody's invited. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, I understand that a small group of you have underwritten the entire cost for this event so that whatever contributions we make will be 100% for the Ukrainian people. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct, and it's going to be the Adventist Development and Relief Agency that is channeling the activities and the funds, so it's going to be a totally tax deductible. So any contributions that you do, that will be 100% tax deductible.
Now it begins at 7:45 this evening. Could
Correct.
you give us the address?
The address, wow.
Well,
yeah.
we can come back. We can come back to that.
Okay, the address, yes. The address is 11608 Placid Court in Colton, California. So,
did you say Placid?
yes, Placid,
Okay.
Placid Court.
Okay, now that's in Ritchie Canyon.
Correct, it's in Ritchie Canyon, correct.
Okay, so it should be a beautiful night under the stars. Dr. Capino wondered if this will be Zoomed.
Unfortunately, will not because I have not had some requests, but we couldn't plan for that. Originally, we were planning on doing that in a church so that all these things technologically and the seating and all these would have been prepared, but we opted for these outdoors, and we don't have the instruments to do the Zoom, unfortunately.
Okay, well, thank you very much for doing that and for giving us the invitation for tonight. Back to Brother Eisenhower.
Yes.
I was, when I left you just momentarily, I was going to ask if you grew up in Bakersfield.
Oh yes. I was born in the a good Presbyterian. I was born in the Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital while my dad was a PhD student at USC. But shortly thereafter, my parents and I moved to Bakersfield, and my dad planted a church, founded a church in Bakersfield. And yes, I grew up my entire life in Bakersfield, and very, very interesting town. Home of Buck Owens and the Buckaroos, of course.
Wow. So you're, Juan, people are asking for the address. If you could put that in the chat so that people can send a contribution. even if they can't be there. That would be helpful. Now, your father was a cleric. I didn't understand that.
Yes, my father was a pastor, Presbyterian pastor for many years. He passed away when I was 19. There are heart problems on his side of my family that I have to be cognizant of. But modern medicine is wonderful, and I see my cardiologist all the time, and he takes good care of me. So I'm doing well. But yes, back to the question. My dad was a pastor for many years.
So you didn't really have an option to be something other than a Presbyterian, did you? Any more than I had an option to be something other than an Adventist. I guess we did, but not a very big one.
Well, it's easy for Presbyterians to think of ourselves as predestined. Yeah, I can agree with that. No problem.
Okay, that's surely an interesting topic for another time.
Right.
Yeah. Now, you entered the ministry after you went to school where?
Fresno State.
Okay.
Fresno State College, and then I went to San Francisco Theological Seminary.
Yes.
But those were the days when SFTS was very, very much involved with the GTU.
Yes.
And so I lived in Berkeley, though the seminary, some of us know, is across the bay over in Marin County. All of us students lived in Berkeley and partook of the Berkeley ambiance. Back in the late 60s, early 70s, People Park riots days, a lot going on in Berkeley in those days.
Wow, that was an exciting time. The seminary is in a beautiful spot, isn't it?
Oh, it's gorgeous. It's in Marin County, San Anselmo, and the buildings are just exquisite, and it's sort of forested, and when you see a picture of it, you think you're looking at an alpine village, maybe. But no, this is Marin County.
Yes. From there, did you go into the pastorate, or did you go back east to study further?
First thing I did was I accepted a call to a church in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so culturally, there was a little bit of a whiplash culturally, moving from Berkeley, California to Lincoln, Nebraska. But I was the youth pastor there at a very large church, Westminster Presbyterian Church in Lincoln, Nebraska. But just one quick comment on the culture. My senior pastor, so my boss, the head of staff at the church, had been chairman of Nebraskans for Nixon, and then I showed up, fresh from the riots of Berkeley, and it was wonderful. It was a phenomenal thing. But it was good for me to realize there's a lot of the world that is not like Berkeley, California is. As a matter of fact, no place in the world is like Berkeley, California is. And I got reminded of that by getting to live in Lincoln, Nebraska. And yeah, I was the youth pastor. And it was after that I decided to go back to school, and ultimately working on a PhD. Yes.
Okay, so from Lincoln, you went back east to Virginia.
Yes.
And you studied there where?
Well, first I got a Master of Theology at Princeton Seminary. And then I was accepted into the PhD program at Union. At the time, it was Union Theological Seminary. They keep changing their name. It's now Union Presbyterian Seminary. And at the time, this was the largest of the Presbyterian schools in the former Southern Presbyterian Church in the United States. Presbyterians were the last denomination to reconcile over the split at the time of the Civil War. You know, there were Northern and Southern various denominations, and there was the Northern Presbyterians reunited with the South, but this was prior to that, and so this was the largest of the schools in the Southern Presbyterian Church. And one of their scholar faculty members that some people of a certain generation would remember is Dr. Bright, who was a biblical scholar and wrote a famous book on the kingdom of God. He was on the faculty there, and several others. So yes, Richmond, Virginia, loved it there. Beautiful part of the world.
Now, somewhere along the line, you got married.
Yeah, Guy, when did that happen? That was back, but that was my first marriage. I got married in seminary at SFTS, San Francisco Seminary, and that marriage lasted 19 years.
Good.
And we had 2 wonderful kids. But the long and the short of the story is my wife decided she didn't want to be married anymore, and up and moved out of state. And so, well, guess what? The marriages don't last, things like that. So
really? Now, you're married now, so you remarried.
Remarried Nancy 26 years ago, yes. And she and I met at the Christian Singles Dance 26 years ago that has been held. I don't know if they're still doing it, but it was an annual thing, Christian Singles Dance on the Queen Mary in Long Beach. And they sell 500 tickets to women and 500 tickets to men. And what seemed to be the case was the 500 tickets to women get sold instantly, and the 500 tickets to men a little bit more slowly. But by the time of it, it's like, okay, you got an equal number of single adults there at the Christian Singles Dance. And I went and I met this beautiful woman, Nancy Schmidt. And we started dating. We fell in love. We got married, and we're still in love to this very day. And it's a marvelous relationship.
Wonderful. Now back to Virginia. You
Yes.
Wrote your dissertation on what topic?
Well, in general, you could say process theology.
Really?
But yes, but my dissertation advisor was Doug Otati.
No.
One of the people that I dedicated my book to, by the way, in fact, on the dedication page, Doug Otati gets mentioned first. Process theology, but specifically Daniel Day Williams, who that's a name not everybody recognizes. He wrote The Spirit and the Forms of Love, and was regarded by people in the process mode as kind of the dean of the process theologians. Well, my thesis was that his theology was actually this very fascinating and healthy blend of the neo-Orthodox theology and the process philosophy, because he took from Brunner and Niebuhr and Barth and wove that together with strands from Whitehead and Hartshorne and Henry Nelson Wyman. So a kind of a both and figure, and it made for fascinating research.
Wow, I went to Claremont, and process thought is pretty heavy there at the time anyway. And they always referred to Daniel Day Williams as the first process systematic theologian.
Okay.
And The Spirit and Forms of Love was highly recommended. And I would recommend to anyone listening now that book, The Spirit and Forms of Love, is a marvelous book. and I hope many people can read it. Those who are listening may remember Wilbur Alexander, and he was on our faculty for many years. That was his favorite book, The Spirit and Forms of Love. Many people don't realize that he was very much influenced by process thought himself, but that was the case, and he was in the clinical ministry area. Okay, so now somewhere along the line, I think you became a consultant for troubled congregations. Am I right about that?
Well, yes, you are right. I became a not really a consultant, but an interim pastor, going from church to church. When a church in lots of systems, unless there's a bishop who can rapidly assign a pastor to a church that loses its pastor, or some other mechanism. Otherwise, the congregation goes through a process of seeking a new pastor, deciding whom to call, and so during that period, be it long or short, the church needs an interim pastor to come in and be the substitute pastor while they are searching. But and this was in your question. Oftentimes there's a reason why the pastor who left. And the two possible reasons are the pastor retired. And I followed one pastor who had been there for 32 years. So the assignment there is to kind of try to awaken some things in the life of the congregation, because people get very, very used to one pastor's way of doing things. But if the pastor hasn't retired, then in my experience, there was always a reason, or there were always reasons why the pastor left when he or she did, and it's the job it's the job of the interim to find out why did that person leave, and people usually will not right at the beginning tell you, right? So it takes some detective work to but there are oftentimes quandaries in the life of church that the current pastor does not know what to do with, and finally just decides, I can't do this anymore. And just for instance, if a pastor leaves and does not retire and does not accept a call to another church, just leaves, then you can say, okay, there's something going on at this church that we need to figure out. And now, once we know what it is, try to bring healing, healing to the church. My favorite story to tell is I got to go and be the interim senior pastor at First Presbyterian Church, Fargo, North Dakota.
Wow.
And big downtown stone church built in the 1930s with stained glass. And, when some people think of Presbyterian churches, this is the kind of church that some people think of for good or for ill. It's so stained glass and just gorgeous. And front of the church, there's the chancel and there's the pulpit, and then the choir processes in and disappears and then reappears up high. The choir loft is vaulted up high above the pulpit, so the choir members can make faces at the sermon, and the pastor never sees because the pastor is looking the other way. Well, that was this church. And just very quickly, why did the previous senior pastor leave? Well, the church decided to have a $1.2 million fundraising campaign. And they didn't reach 1.2 million, they reached 1.5 $5 million. They got more money than they knew what to do with. And that's when the arguments broke out. What are we going to do with the extra money? And the arguments got so heated and hostile. Finally, the senior pastor just threw up his hands and just left. And so I came in and got to be the one to try to bring healing to the church that didn't know what to do with its successes, you know. So and I love that role. I love the role because you come in and you're brand new and you know less about the church than absolutely everyone else in the congregation, but you're in charge. So it's very humbling to know that I'm in charge and I really don't know. So I love that role.
Wow, what a specialized ministry. How
Yeah.
interesting. Now,
Yeah.
somehow or the other, we got together, we met each other at Loma Linda. How did that happen?
Well, let's see. My last gig was not as an interim. I went to the Presbyterian Church in Indio for a number of years, but then it was going to be time to retire, and I knew I would be retiring from the Indio congregation, and was trying to decide what I wanted to do with. It's like I began to think of it, and some people talk about an encore career, and I began to think about, you know, what kind of encore career, and for a while there, I was thinking I want to be a freelance pastoral counselor. But I think for fun, I want to go back to school and get some kind of a counseling degree, counseling credential. And I began looking online at counseling programs. Well, one of the schools in the area, obviously, that somebody would want to consider would be, you know, because of the various psychology and therapist degree programs that Loma Linda has. I began looking at the various programs at Loma Linda, and then what happened is sort of mysterious, and honestly, I think it's quite a bit the hand of God. I became more and more interested, not in Loma Linda's counseling programs, but in Loma Linda's bioethics program. So much so that I finally decided, you know what, I've been looking at the right school, but at the wrong programs. I wanted to, so I began considering the master's degree in bioethics, and it was an evolution that I believe God very much guided. But I began taking, I could take night classes in bioethics in the last, like, say, year and a half that I was a parish pastor, and then once I resigned from the ministry, then I had a little more time, and I was able to double up on the master's degree programs. Yes, so that's how that happened. I kind of backed into it in a way.
Well, we're delighted that you came our way. It was a lot of fun.
Yes.
To have you on board, and I want to thank you again for pitching in and teaching some of my courses when I had to have a little medical leave. So that worked out very well. Now let's shift a little bit to your book, and I'd like to do that by asking, who is Mandy?
Oh, Mandy. Yes. If you get the book and you read the introduction, that's not her real name, but there was a student in one of the courses, and Dave, this might have even been one of the courses of yours that I took, but she was that one. I'm not 100% sure, but in class the professor, and I forget if it was you or one of the other professors, talking about something, and it made me think of Martin Luther, and Luther's "Here I stand, I can do no other." And so I said, now, is there a Martin Luther influence in, like, it would be something like, the present day emphasis in bioethics on the autonomy of the individual? I was wondering, can you draw a line historically from the emphasis on the autonomy of the individual back to Martin Luther saying, or at least he either said, "Here I stand, I can do no other," or we all remember it as if he had said that. Some historians say, well, no, the historical records don't have him ever saying that, but it's a wonderful slogan. Anyway, I asked the question, and you or the professor of the class, what I remember is going up to the chalkboard and writing down on, this and this and this and this, and then time for a break, and professor leaves the room. And then this phenomenal moment, she turned around, and I was sitting directly behind her, and she turned around, professor out of the room because it's break time, and she said, "Who is Martin Luther?" And I was sort of quite surprised, and I said, well, you remember the Reformation, right? And she just had this like blank, no, she didn't remember the Reformation. I said, well, you remember in European history, there's the Renaissance, right? And she said, yeah, I remember that from high school. And so I then tried to quickly sort of say who Martin Luther was to someone who did not recognize the name and seems never to have been taught about the Reformation either. And I thought about that long and hard because she was the smartest student in the class. She was just stellar. She was hugely impressive, but her medical background and her science background heretofore had evidently had some gaps in it. And when you want to bring ethical reflection to medical questions, there are these people that you just can't help but consider drawing from, and lots of people, don't draw from Martin Luther for their ethics, but nevertheless, you want to at least know who that person was. So when I thought about writing a book on bioethics and including little historical vignettes of people that I thought everybody should know, well, there were the figures that Dr. Larson, that we covered in classes of yours. We did John Stuart Mill and Immanuel Kant and Aristotle and Plato and Thomas Aquinas. So there are the standard ones that you want to cover. But I thought, I want to include names that I believe this is a terribly important figure, but not necessarily the ones that that everybody would get in your actual bioethics classes. And so I knew I wanted to put a paragraph in there identifying Martin Luther and explaining what I thought his ethical significance was. But right along with that, I'll also say, once I knew that, I knew, what? Back in the Middle Ages, I have this vague notion that there were Arabic and Islamic figures that were the hugely influential transitional figures that brought the Greco-Roman learning, kept it alive during the Middle Ages, and then were responsible for passing it on after the time of the Crusades up into Europe. So I knew I wanted Avicenna and Averroes, and I included several of those as well. So I'm talking about Luther, but I want to just say, and because of Luther, I decided that there were other people that I needed to include as well. But Mandy she's a real individual, and she really, oh my gosh, it was just so impressive academically. And I go, how can somebody this bright never have heard of Martin Luther? Well, if she gets my book, I want to make sure that that I fix that.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you were encountering some scientists and clinicians.
Right.
I should say, you were encountering people on the bioethics side or the humanities side that did not know the language of the scientists and the clinicians.
Right.
So it was the
Absolutely.
opposite problem.
Yeah, and I would put myself in that category, the category of it's like when we got in your class to Immanuel Kant, it's like, you know, that's not a challenge for me. That's not hard. But when we're dealing with the science and dealing with the medicine, that's where I was dreadfully unfamiliar. And so in my book, I was in part trying to do remedial bioethics education for myself as someone who did not have the science background that lots of my fellow MA students, they had the science background, maybe not the humanities, but the science. Well, I was someone, and I think there are a lot of people in my my situation.
Right. Now, that's why your book is entitled A Bioethicist Dictionary, not
Yes.
a bioethics dictionary, a bioethicist dictionary. So it's to help people in the humanities be
Yes.
Updated on the sciences, and to have those in the sciences updated on the humanities. So it's
Right.
a remarkably bridging book. Now, do you remember how many terms you have in the book?
I believe it's 854 entries, and of those, 95 are the historical figures, and the historical figures I clumped together in a section at the end so that they could be found quickly and easily. But with both historical figures and terms, the total number of entries is 854. Yes.
That's amazing. I see if I can get this on the screen. I'm not sure. Can you see that?
I can.
Okay, so this is what the book looks like. It's a beautiful book, and it has, there we go, some 800 entries to it. So I recommend everybody to get it and just put it beside your bed and read an entry or two a night, and you'll become a very well educated person in the world of bioethics. So I'm just, here is the letter W: warm handcuff, weaning, who gets the kidney, withholding and withdrawing life-prolonging treatment. I'd like to pause there. I just opened this by chance, but we need to turn back to that one. Wounded healer, wrongful conception versus wrongful birth versus wrongful life. And so I keep going. Psychiatric whole, now I'm down into the others. What do we have here? The 80-20 rule, moment, and so forth. Now, you spent a lot of time, and still do. Here's one on Sir Edwin Chadwick, another one on Rachel Carson, another one on Elizabeth Blackwell, David Beauvais. Is that right?
Yes.
Beauvais. John
Yes.
Calvin. All right, that's good for a Presbyterian. Forrest Bird. These are all important people, both in clinicians and for scientists, and for those in the humanities and in ethics. So it's a marvelous bridging of these ways, and it fills a very important need. And I thank you for writing this book. Now, you spend a lot of time in clinical ethics, particularly in the medical center, Loma Linda University Medical Center. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, let's see. For starters, yes, in the master's program, one of the wonderful privileges that students get, and maybe they don't think of it as a wonderful privilege, but they should. Students in the master's in bioethics program at Loma Linda get to go to the every Wednesday clinical ethics case consultation meetings that pre-COVID-19 were held in a little teeny jammed together room where each week the clinical ethics cases of the previous week were cited, referred to, explained, and then discussed. I began going to those, loved the experience, frontline experience. It was just fascinating. And so got permission after I graduated. I said, would it be all right if I continued to attend these Wednesday meetings, even though I'm not a student anymore? And they said yes. And then because of that, really, really nice, I was asked, would you be willing to serve as one of our community representatives on the official hospital ethics committee? Nearly every hospital in America has an ethics committee, more or like this. And Loma Linda's ethics committee meets once a month and does a lot of the same thing as the every Wednesday meetings. But while I was going every Wednesday to those meetings, I said, yes, I would love to serve on the hospital ethics committee. And now this is the official body that is charged with various things, like when it is time to update a hospital policy that has an ethical relevance, then this is the hospital committee that considers it and makes recommendations about it. But at each meeting, yes, we also talk about clinical cases, and we discuss ethical angles on clinical cases. And then in addition to that, because I'm on the hospital committee, every now and then, it's not all the time, but every now and then I get asked if I will be a part of an ethics consult for a specific patient. There's a patient and ethical decisions that need to be made regarding the care of the patient. And so an ad hoc committee is pulled together just for this patient. And sometimes I am invited to be in on that. Oftentimes it's because the patient is unrepresented. We used to call them unbefriended patients, but more recently, unrepresented patients. And Loma Linda Hospital, in its policies, has a policy P23. So this is alphabetical letter P and the 23rd of the P policies. And it talks about unrepresented patients and how decisions will be made, and that an ethics consult will be formed in order to discuss the case and make decisions for this specific patient. So I get to serve on those every once in a while also. So all together with the Wednesday and with the once a month and with it, I end up continuing to be a part of things at the that are taking place at the Loma Linda Hospital, and love every minute of it. So those are the first things that come to my mind.
Okay, now I'd like to see if there's anybody in the Centennial Complex who would like to ask a question or make a comment. And we'd like to hear from you now, if possible, because we have about 11 minutes before you need to take off for the worship service, if that's what you're going to do. So if anybody has a comment, anybody has a question for Will Eisenhower, let's hear from you now.
Everybody's silent?
There we go.
No, Dave. They're all awestruck, so.
Okay,
I've got a question.
there's nobody who wants to step up to the mic right now.
It's not a question, Dave.
Okay. Go ahead, McKinley.
No, turn it
Oh,
on.
not me. I meant in the Centennial Complex.
Turn it on. Turn it on.
Okay, Dr. Keto. Dr. Keto has a question or a comment. Thank you very much. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you. The question I have is really an obvious question, and it has to do with the release of the draft for abortion that's just been released. What effect, if any, will that have in California?
Did you hear the question, Will?
Yes, I did. And the question as I heard it was, is the release, given the release of the Justice Alito document, what's the significance of that within the state of California?
Right.
Did I get it mostly good?
Perfect.
Okay. I do not present myself as an expert on that, but I think what we can assume is that liberal states many of them have set in place state laws that are designed to kick in should the Supreme Court ever reverse itself on Roe v. Wade. And New York is one of those, California is one of those. And so the short answer is, I think that the situation in California will change in that now abortions in California will be governed by state law rather than by federal. Now that's, I don't think I'm doing anything other than saying what many people know.
Okay. I think it's an important question, and we'll discuss it further after the break. But
Good.
there are also states that have trigger laws like that, which would come up with more restrictive moves, whereas California would come up with more permissive moves on that subject. It's a very interesting topic, and we'll spend more time on it. Is there anyone else in the Centennial Complex who would like to speak?
Peter.
Peter.
Dr. Eisenhower, do you think that it will not be more democratic way to tackle this problem if this will be transferred to the states? And every state will decide according to what the people living in that state believe is better for them than to have kind of one shoe fits all that we have right now. And second, if you can comment a little bit about this problem, the abortion, in light of the natural law, not only the common law.
In light of natural law and common law, was that
Canon
the
law?
end of the question?
Correct.
Well, let's see. Dave, let me let you weigh in first.
I'm not sure I heard the question entirely. I thought the first one was whether the democratic process on a state-by-state basis you find that attractive. I think that was it. Was that right, Peter?
Yes, correct.
Okay, he said that's right. So what's going to happen is that if this document gets approved, and it looks like it will be, the issue of abortion will be settled state by state by that state's own democratic process. Some states already have trigger laws in place, so they won't have to do that. But I guess Peter's question is whether I hope I'm representing Peter right, whether you think that solving this state by state in a democratic way within each state is better than having a national policy.
Yes.
Yes, and let's see. I think the image was one shoe fits all instead of one shoe fits all, state by state. And my short answer is yes. I believe that is more attractive than what we have right now. What we have right now is unsustainable, and so yes, I believe it's more attractive. Now, to say a little bit more about that, where I come down is I don't see how abortion can be found to be moral. An abortion would always be unfortunate, and certainly under many circumstances would not be the moral option of the options available to a woman. But if you know just even a little bit about medicine, you understand that there are medical emergencies. There are instances when the continuation of the pregnancy threatens the health of the mother, or even the life of the mother. And so I am certainly willing to allow for exceptions, even though I recognize that then the problem for me is where do you how far do you allow the exceptions to go, and where's the cutoff so that you don't allow exceptions further? As in, just for starters, does the mental health of the mother get to count as endangering the health of the mother? If the mental health of the mother gets to count, who gets to decide? Would it be the woman herself and the abortion provider? Is that who decides, yes, this is a threat to your mental health? It's like the shades of gray quickly become very, very, very problematic. And I acknowledge that my position can't solve everything, because the only way to completely rule out irresponsible exceptions is to eliminate all exceptions, and that's what some people want to do, is no exceptions whatsoever, just an absolutist stance. Well, I find that the no exceptions option as irresponsible as the no limitations model, and any of us who want to find a place in the middle realize that we're sort of in a tippy canoe, to say. So, but and because of that, it's like, might as well do it on a state by state in order for people who live together in geographic proximity to decide how they're going to call it. So yes, I think the state by state is more attractive.
Okay, I see Simona wants to make a comment or ask a question, but I'm going to ask her to wait till after the break so that we can hear more from the people in the Centennial Complex. Do you want to take a run at Peter's second question, which had to do with law? I'm not quite sure I heard it. Do you want to repeat that, Peter?
Yes, I was wondering if Dr. Eisenhower can comment a little bit about the importance of looking at these bioethical problems in light not only of the common law, but also the natural law.
Okay, common law versus natural law. I think that's the distinction. Is that right, Peter?
Yes, correct.
Okay. What do you want to say about that, Will?
Well, I think the first thing that question reminds me of is that the United States position on abortion, many of us realize, has been for decades now much more permissive than in most other nations all around the world. I think be it common law or natural law, nations that have made policies on abortion, many of them have policies that are much more restrictive than the policy that we've had in the United States. Why would that be? Well, I think it would be because natural law influences a concern about natural law would raise the issue of the preservation of innocent life. And nations have been guided by the belief that innocent life, there is a state interest in the protection of innocent life, that in America, neither common law nor natural law has been the influence. I think the influence has been, and I don't want to get hugely controversial, but I think in America, the position on the left regarding abortion has been influenced by politics, not by natural law, not by common law, and honestly, not even with a concern about the moral issues at all, but rather men on the Supreme Court, 9 men on the Supreme Court don't get to, and we have had women more recently, but it used to be said, 9 men in black robes are telling the women of this country what they can and cannot do with their bodies, and that's wrong. But it's not argued morally; it's argued politically, and I think it will be better if we begin to assess abortion from moral standpoints and no longer let it be decided just because of a political cause that needs to be advanced, the liberation of women.
Okay, thank you for that. We will continue. It's now 11:32. Let's take a 10-minute break, and I'll ask you to go get a drink or something, because if you stay there, people will ask you questions.
Okay.
We don't want them to
fair
do
enough.
that, because we want to hear the questions. So those of you who are going to church, thank you very much for being with us, and we will hopefully see you next week.
Okay, I would say if you want to ask a question, please raise your hand, either electronically or just wave your hand. I'll try to see you. I do miss you sometimes if you're just waving it, but I will be establishing a queue here. So I will look at it. And so what time are we going to come back? Was it 11:42? 11:43, we'll come back. envisioning Reverend Eisenhower in tie-dyed clothes, the long hair, and bell bottoms. So
Yes, those were the days.
Maybe it sounds like there's a lot of interest in the Alito document. Maybe I can quickly summarize what's happening, and then we can go to the questions. Very quickly, there's a line of Supreme Court cases that begins with Griswold versus Connecticut on contraception, and then goes down to Roe v. Wade on abortion, and then down to Planned Parenthood versus Casey in Pennsylvania. Both of those were on abortion. The difference is that Roe v. Wade established a 3-trimester program by which abortion was pretty wide open in the first trimester. And up through the second trimester, the states were given permission to pass laws on behalf of maternal well-being. And then in the third trimester, states were given permission to pass laws on behalf of fetal well-being. In Planned Parenthood versus Casey, there was the proposal from the state of Pennsylvania to make several changes. One had to do with medical definitions that aren't all that controversial, and the second one had to do with record keeping, and it's not very controversial too. But the three that of the remaining 5 had to do with a required waiting period first, and secondly, requiring minors to consult with their parents, and thirdly, wives having to consult with their husbands. And the Supreme Court let the minor notification requirement stand and the waiting period stand, but it did not approve the spousal notification plan. And Casey did away with the trimester system. So that's what happened there. Now, Lawrence versus Texas was also decided on privacy grounds, but it had to do with private sexual intimacy, particularly homosexual intimacy, which Texas had outruled even in the privacy of people's homes. And the Supreme Court said that that was not constitutional. Now, all of this, Alito, in his document, takes issue with this whole line of thought on 3 grounds at least. One of them is that this right of privacy is inferred from the Constitution in a variety of ways, and the Bill of Rights amendments to it, but he does not find that inference to be plausible. Secondly, Roe v. Wade does make some historical claims about the history of abortion in the United States, which Alito, I think, persuasively establishes to be just plain erroneous historically. Roe v. Wade had said there was widespread permission about abortion, and Alito's able to show how, in fact, abortion was quite restricted over the previous years of the nation. And then thirdly, the thought that the Supreme Court should not overturn Roe v. Wade because it would be too disruptive to do so and would not serve the country well. He did not find that to be persuasive either. So it looks like the Supreme Court will send this back to the states, and each state will settle this in its own way. And there are trigger states. There are states with trigger laws that will restrict abortion quite severely. And there are states with trigger laws that might make it even more permissive than it now is. So that's where we now stand. And I think I'm with Will on the idea that it's probably a good idea to settle this on a state-by-state basis. One objection is that will make it hard for women to get abortions when they're in restrictive states. But I don't think that's going to change too much, because in 89% of the counties in the United States right now, 89% of the counties in the United States, there is no abortion clinic. Now, that doesn't mean abortions don't take place, because they can take place in doctors' offices and other kinds of clinics. But the typical place for these to occur is in an abortion clinic. And in 89% of the counties of the United States today, there is no abortion clinic. So there are already severe impediments to people because they already have to travel some distance to get an abortion. So that's where we stand. Will, do you want to add or subtract anything more from that before we move on?
We'll move on to a different topic.
No, I mean more about this. I think people are going to linger here for a little bit.
Okay. Well, let's see. I do want to inject a different angle, a different point of view for looking at this one issue and the change that the Alito document, if it's if that is the one that is issued by the court. I would just like to say that for people of faith, there is a whole nother, I like that phrase, there's a whole nother thing that needs to be considered, and that is America is not influenced by its faith communities today the way that it was when I was young, when I was first in college and first going to seminary, so it's problematic how people who represent faith communities and who want to speak out of what influences them within their faith community. And I would say, if we're going to talk, if we're going to quote scripture, for instance, if we're going to talk about the example of Jesus, if we're going to do anything that smacks of religion, that's going to be less influential today than it was at the time that Roe v. Wade first came along. But though that is true, I just want to say it's hard for me to see this, even though if we send it out to the states, it's easy for me to see the pain of this issue remaining until we have some kind of a religious revival in this. I think this is one of those ethical issues that will continue to haunt us, and we can manage it. We can adjust to it. We can handle it maybe better than we have been handling it for the past 50 years. But I don't think there's a political solution to this. I think there is a faith solution. And when God is ready, I think I am trusting that he will send the faith solution our way. And it will be the change in individual hearts that will, I'll end with this one. I believe someday historians will be able to look back and say that stayed a problem in America until hearts begin to change. There.
Okay. Now I failed to do something I should have before we got started again, and that was to remind us that Juan has put all the information about tonight on the chat so people can get it there. But also I sent it out in the email earlier this week, and you have the QR code and so forth there. So there's quite an interest developing around the country for people who cannot be there tonight, but would like to send contributions. So that information is available on the chat and also in the emails I sent out. That's an interesting point at which you ended, Will. It is true that this is the legal political discussion, and there remains the biblical, theological, spiritual discussion. And it's interesting to me that we need to look forward, in your view, to a religious revival before we can expect this to be solved. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Forrest.
Okay, just rate, I've got several hands up. I'm going to ask again to spend no more than 3 minutes in asking a question or making a statement, because I want to get as many people as we can here. So I'm going to start with Simona, because your hand is probably tired by now. It's been up for a while. So
I don't
Simona?
tire. I don't tire easily. Thank you.
okay, go ahead,
So
Simona.
the problem with the state by state thing is that it creates unequal rights.
Oop, I'm sorry. I muted you by mistake. Simona, there you go.
Okay, so the problem with the state by state approach is that it creates unequal rights for women. In other ways, creating states in which women are going to become second-class citizens without rights. And we already see that, for example, in the law that is currently in the makes in Missouri, for example, where abortion will be prohibited from fertilization, which means that even IUDs, which are the most common form, one of the most common forms of contraception, are basically going to be outlawed. And there are women currently called by their physicians to take IUDs out because it's going to be against the law and they can end up in prison for murder. And so, you know, it's creating a situation where women are not seen as autonomous beings, as persons who are unable and should not be given the right to make a decision for themselves what happens with their own body. And I guarantee you that if we asked states to impose laws on men, for example, everybody to get, you know, sterilized when they are young so that they can't have kids until they're ready for it, you know, it's a 15-minute procedure. So let's go and do it. And we are solving the problem of solution. There will be an uproar because men see themselves as more as worthier and they have the full capacity to make the decision where women don't. And so that is one issue. Second issue, you're talking about moral stance. Whose moral stance? There are people in this country who are not evangelical Christians, who are Muslims, and who are Jews and who don't have any religion whatsoever, whose rights are being basically taken over by religious right, which believes that it has the right to impose their views on everybody else. And that is not okay. That is not okay from the biblical point of view. The God didn't give us the right to do that kind of stuff because he didn't force anybody to do anything. Rather, he went and sacrificed himself so that people would have freedom to choose. And we are taking that right to eliminate freedom of women to make that choice. And that's not okay. So I think this, the third point that I want to make is that this has never been about children and innocent lives. This is about control of women. And one of the things that you can see in this Alito's case and that he wrote, he quoted that abomination of female persuasion that's currently sitting on the SCOTUS, who said that the reason why abortion should be prohibited is because we require domestic supply of infants. This is direct quote, domestic supply of infants for adoption. Like children are cattle and women are just broodmares. And this is unacceptable to me at the moral level, as at the level as a woman, at the level as a human being. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that, Reverend Eisenhower?
Well, Simona, I thank you for that because you spoke very well, very eloquently, and many people in America share your perspective. If I believe that there is a point where a fetus starts needing to be recognized as a person, Am I wrong?
Yes, you are, by every law. Because the personhood cannot exist without a developed brain system, central nervous system. And it has been, it is a well-known issue in bioethics. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Well, then I think we disagree, because I think that the question of, is there a point where the fetus becomes a person in his or her own right? That is a moral question that can't be dodged. So I think
well, actually, I think that there is a pretty good understanding that once the fetus reaches viability, the fetal right takes over.
Might I suggest you let
it's not something that that you or I decide. It is a medical question, when the fetus is capable of surviving on its own.
Okay, I'm just going to suggest that we let Reverend Eisenhower respond, and then we'll go on. Thank you.
Well, so I believe that I heard you just say that after the point of viability is reached, abortion then should be illegal because the fetus is now viable and therefore is a person with his or her own rights. So am I hearing you correctly?
Yeah.
To a point, what I'm saying is that when the fetus is viable, then the rules change, because the rules change on behalf of preserving the life. Unless we are talking about, for example, specific items, for example, life of a woman who is pregnant. So if life of a woman is jeopardized, then the life of a woman is supreme compared to the life of the fetus. So the fetus still doesn't have the right to survive if the woman's life is in danger. And there are also some other rules that are currently in place. So this is where things become a little bit less clear and a little bit more complicated. There is no question about whose life matters throughout the entire pregnancy, and it is always the woman's life, because she is an existing life, a full life that is that already has all the rights of the person, while fetus is a potential life.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I would like to go on to another question, if I may. Anastasia, I'm going to go to you next.
Thank you. I'll be
3 minutes, remember.
quick. Yeah, well, I always stay in 3 minutes. Thank you. Don't I? Maybe 3 Greek minutes.
Well, we're going to do 3 New York minutes here. So.
Yeah, just stop me if I don't.
I will.
First of all, Dr. Eisenhower, thank you, and be equal to everybody as you are. Dr. Eisenhower, thank you so very much, very, very much. You are right, it's much more complicated, and it has been unfortunately politicized on both sides, though there are merits on both sides. I want to ask you this about the state to state, besides the inequality, of course, and again, it's against the least of them, the raped, the incest, all this. But if that was a matter of racism, would we say it's moral to say California can have racism, but South Carolina can do as it pleases? If something is that, why do we need a federal government? There are rights for states, but on moral issues, at least, as this, can we say it's all right to have abortions on demand or whatever on this place, and you can go there at any time, and only a few, of course, and rich can do it, and the other, but you, the rest of you, you can have racism. If we don't do that with racism, why should we do it with abortion? And the other thing is about God. God has put, and I believe in the Trinity as well, has put the Holy Spirit to move us. We need to go before moving us just, but like the Catholic Church, like the Orthodox Church, at this point, we have to put the action where our mouth is. We have to take, if we want to save that baby or that woman, we need to have means, institutions, programs to take the babies to good families with abortion, etc. Thank you very much. Thank you, Forrest. I need the control.
Yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
have the sheriff get on you. That's what I'll do. Okay,
Thank you, bless you.
Reverend Eisenhower, please respond. I mean, if you'd like to answer that.
Well, let's see, I'm happy to. And as I do, I want to say, I certainly do not see myself as an expert on the abortion issue. But all of us are getting to rethink our positions afresh and anew because of the leaked document. So it's a headline issue, and so therefore I'd say yes, whoever your latest speaker is, you should ask that person what are your opinion on the various facets of this as it now stands. So I think you're right to ask me. It's just that as I answer, I'm a person like you thinking this through and not having a deep background. But I think the heart of your concern has to do with we don't let state by state decide on slavery, on racism issues. Why would we let state by states decide on abortion? And that's a fascinating. Wow, I heard my phone or somebody's phone.
No, that was my phone. That's my timer.
Okay. Oh.
But you're
is my
okay.
time up?
I had it set for Anastasia, but you're fine. You're fine.
I'm privileged.
All right. Let me know when my time is up.
Well, I'd like to, just answer,
Yeah.
whatever's been
I don't think-
predetermined
I
in
don't
history
think there's
past,
a-
you can do.
I don't think I have a short answer as to why state by state would be good on the one hand and why state by state would be bad on the other hand, because states' rights has been claimed for all sorts of concerns, and within American history, many of the times we have decided, no, we're one nation, and we're not going to let states come up with their own rules on that. Well, why would we? So I can't logically defend it, but I would just say, I think the position of the Alito document, the spirit of the document, as I understand it, is we are divided as a people on this one. It is not the case that everybody in Mississippi believes one way, but everybody in California believes another way. But rather that sprinkled throughout the country, we are divided, and that the reasonings on the one side have been privileged and given supremacy in a way that Judge Alito and evidently a majority of the justices would say, we don't think it makes sense to give the one side 100% on this one and to give the other side 0% on this one. I know he would not say that about racism issues, and let's just say I know he would not say that on slavery, but on this one he would say trying to go 100% 0% has not healed our land, and as a matter of fact, as many people have pointed out, Roe v. Wade didn't solve the issue, it provoked the issue. And that we are more divided now on this than we were pre-Roe. And sometimes when you realize a particular solution has made the situation worse, you say, you know what, let's go back to status quo ante. Let's go back to how things were before we had that solution, because the solution is worse than the original problem that it tried to solve. Now, the people who benefited, who appreciated, who valued the Roe v. Wade solution are losing, and the people who have felt disenfranchised by the Roe v. Wade decision because it does not respect their values, have felt disempowered, and now are feeling like, oh my gosh, we've got a new lease on life. Look, we're being respected now. But I certainly understand if you've liked Roe v. Wade, I certainly understand this would look like a terrible, terrible turn of events to you, because you are losing something that you counted on as one of the things that makes America great. It's just that many people in America take the other view, and the Alito document seems to be saying there's no reason to divide this up in 100%. There's no reason to divide this up in a winner takes all way. Well, state by state, it's like that you've got 50 winner take alls. I mean, so I appreciate that. That is kind of goofy. And no, it's not a precedent that you would want to apply to lots and lots of other ones. But I think the heart of the Alito document is our solution has not solved anything. So let's try going back to how it was before we had the solution.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, I have got 6, 7 hands up. I just ask that you please ask your question in a concise manner so that I can get to all of us. We've got 25 minutes here. So Eduardo.
Thank you. Brother Eisenhower, I don't know if I can pronounce your last name correctly.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Do you know, before my question, do you know anything about Seventh-day Adventists?
Please ask your question.
I know a little bit about Seventh-day Adventists, starting with Sabbath is Saturday.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
My issue is that you mentioned that the pro-life movement is made by the by politics rather than a moral issue. And let me tell you why I disagree with you.
Okay.
If you read the papal encyclicals, they are teaching their lay members to become involved in politics. So what is behind the politics is the religious mind. I think that that's the issue. And if you see nuns, priests, bishops, a lot of religious people are behind this movement. And that's where I disagree, that the issue is becoming political rather than moral. And I think it's the other way. The only face that they are giving is politics, but it's not politics. It's moral behind their politics. What do you think?
Well, let's see. I may not have expressed myself very well. What I I'll try again, but I'll try to be succinct. If a person's stance is fetuses never come to a point, fetuses prior to delivery are never worth considering as a person. That issue should never be raised, and anyone who does raise it only wants to subjugate women. So outlawing abortion at any point, or even raising the question, is there a moral obligation that we have to protect fetal life anywhere along in the 9 months of pregnancy? If the answer to that question is no, and by raising that, you are showing that you just want to disempower women everywhere. That's what I mean by politics. What I mean is women's issues are the only issue, and concern about the fetus is disallowed. And why is it disallowed? It's not disallowed on moral grounds because we've thought it through and come to a moral conclusion, but because we've decided caring morally about fetuses is a smokescreen for disempowering women, for subjugating women. That's what I mean by it. It's being decided on political grounds rather than on moral grounds.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay, I'd like to go to Monty. Monty?
Takes me a moment to get unmuted.
Okay.
First of all, since I'm going to keep this within my 3 minutes, I want to respond to Dave. It's a comment. Dave, it doesn't really matter how many states or counties have abortion clinics. Those counties are also impacted by laws that restrict privacy and or various types of birth control, as Simona pointed out. So I don't think a focus on abortion clinics is the only impact that this would have. So I would argue that every county is impacted by this ruling. Second, now I want to come back to Reverend Eisenhower. Reverend Eisenhower, you're a philosopher, so you understand what I mean by a straw man, and you have on numerous occasions, and I'd encourage you not to do this, you've built straw man argument. Reasoning on one side has been given 100% privilege given the Roe v. Wade. You've made that statement multiple times. If that were the case, if it was 100%, then it would be abortion, any abortion, anytime, under all circumstances. That would be 100%. That's not what Roe v. Wade is. So to me, your description of Roe v. Wade is a very broad exaggeration. I want to come back, and I do have a question for you, because you did talk about how you've talked about a point of viability. You've talked about having some parameters in terms of not a total restriction of abortion, but not a total allowance of restriction. So you've talked about wanting to have some of these parameters. My question to you is how would you want the, so I'm assuming you're not really arguing for your straw man of 100 one side or the other, but some parameters. For me, Roe v. Wade was parameters on the national level. How would you see parameters working on a state by state level? How would that look? Because in one state, maybe you would have 100% on one side and another state 100% on the other. To me, what Roe v. Wade was a national process for setting boundaries, and then beyond those boundaries is what happens state by state. So could you respond to that? How do you see parameters working on a state by state basis and not becoming extremes?
Well, let's see. First, I accept your criticism, and yes, a straw man argument is generally to be avoided. And if I'm using straw men or arguments or straw man arguments multiple times, now it's because guess what? I have never spoken publicly on the Alito document before right now, and so you are asking someone who has had how many days have we had? 2, 3, 4, 5 days to think about this and to process it. And so if I end up expressing myself in a non-ideal way, as well, I hope next time I will express myself better. I agree with you that one expression that people use is kicking the can down the road. And if I would come back to your concern, I would describe it as we used to have one can. And what we've done is we've decided to kick 50 cans down the road. And each of those cans is going to have problems that used to be a part of the one can. Are we liable to see extremes that are more extreme within states now than we had when there was a national standard? I don't think that there's any question, and I hope that that can be liberating in time. But I think if I understand your concern, I think I agree with your concern. It's like now, you know, how is this going to work out in for people that want to be pro-choice in the strictest of pro-life states after the decision is made? We're going to have some serious problems on our hands. If I understand your concern, I think I agree with it.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to clarify, my concern is on both extremes. I think we can have extremes on both ends, and I'm concerned about those.
And that's what I heard you as saying, and that's the reason why I can agree with you, because it's like, boy, you really hit the nail on the head, and I think you're right.
Okay, thank you. I would like to go to Robert Ford. Robert, Bob? Are you there, Bob? Well, I'm gonna have to, I'll come back to Robert. Juan?
Can you hear me?
There he is. Okay. Okay,
Okay.
Bob.
Well, I'd like to support what Monty and Simona have been saying. I just want to add one other element that you mentioned that on the liberal side, you see it as primarily a liberal agenda about the rights of women, and that is part of it. But isn't there also a political agenda on the right from those that are pushing what is a form of Christian nationalism that believes that one particular view of Christianity can impose their will on a multicultural, open society? Now, isn't that even more dangerous, particularly when all public opinion show that 70 to 80% of the population supports Roe versus Wade or something like that? So, you know, saying that this is only political on the left, I think is ignoring the politics of the extreme right as well. So what's your comment about that?
Well, let's see. I agree with you. There's politics on the right and there's politics on the left. I don't agree that that politics on the right is obviously more dangerous. I wouldn't go that far, but I agree with you. Yeah, there's politics on both sides. And certainly if we're talking about officials who use the issue for campaigning, contribution, solicitation purposes on the right and on the left, and freestanding organizations that that are on the either pro-life side or pro-choice side that use this for fundraising. Yeah, that happens on both sides. I wouldn't say it's worse. It's obvious to me that it's more dangerous on one side or the other, but yes, it's certainly on both sides. Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to disagree a little bit with that. I believe the danger from the Christian right, so-called Christian nationalist right, is dangerous and more dangerous than those maybe more on the left or center that believe in a multicultural society where everyone can live in peace together, whether you're a Christian or Muslim or not a religion or whatever. And it's going to not only kill the whole issue of separation of church and state, it's going to end the nature of our democracy, which was set up to be to avoid those traps that can come with religious minorities. So I think we're entering a very dangerous phase if we're not careful.
I hear you as saying on the left, we have multiculturalism, people are free to make up their decisions. And on the right, we have a strict moral code. I think there's a strict moral, right now, there's a strict moral code on the left that is as strict as anything you find on the right.
Well, that's your opinion, but I disagree with that.
Okay.
I think that.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, bye.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to go to Juan.
Okay. This time is Carmen.
Carmen, even better.
Thank you for your presentation. You've been brave to present this subject. It is complicated, and that's why we all have all these different ideas. I'm not an expert on the issue, but I'm thinking that we should separate what is legal from what is moral. Not everything that is legal is moral, even in this country. There are issues that relate with life too, like gun ownership. And there are, I don't want to start another complicated subject, but it's very protected. And I think it's legal, but the morality of the issue is controversial too. And there are many different opinions about it. So I'm concerned about this legalization of morality. And my question is that, is it ethical to rule, to legalize morality? That's my question.
Wow. Oh, I love that one. I love that question. Is it ethical to legalize morality? We've been talking about abortion and the Alito document, but you raised gun ownership also as a way of saying your question applies to more than one area. So what if I respond more generally to the question as you have asked it? Is it ethical to legalize morality? And that's a wonderful question, because when I attempted it at an earlier point to say, I don't think we're going to solve this until we can solve it in the human heart. That was my way of saying, you can't legislate morality. Morality has to spring freely from willing hearts. And when people are constrained by regulations, when they are constrained by things that are imposed, for instance, by the state, if they comply with the regulations of the state, are they being moral, or are they just going along And that reminds me of a wonderful quote from long ago from Rudolf Bultmann. And that is, there's a difference between acting obediently and being obedient. And he was talking about it specifically in a Christian context, but I think we could apply it to your question and say, is there a difference between acting morally and being moral? And I think, yes, I think there's a huge difference. And what we want is not a nation of people who are acting morally. We want a nation of people who are being moral because they are freely choosing to do the right thing. But I also remember another quote from Martin Luther King during the civil rights movement days, where he was facing people asking questions similar to that. And he said, the law can't force you to love me, but the law can prevent you from killing me. So there is certainly a place for the constraints of the law, but nevertheless, I don't think law is going to be our solution.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. McKinley, you're in witness protection, I see still.
Thank you, Forrest. My question is a little different. So I don't know if you want to go to George Tichy if his question is about this abortion thing first.
Okay. George, coming to you. George?
Okay. About among the many points I would like to talk, I have to pick one. I will make a statement only shortly. There is a factor involved here that is power and control, men in power of women. I'm a psychologist. I did domestic violence treatment for perpetrators for 12 years. And one thing I learned is this, that it's all about power and control. There's something being transmitted from man to man, from generation to generation. That we
George, you're breaking up on us here.
Have to be in control.
No, George, you're breaking up. I'm sorry.
Cut your video. Cut your video and keep talking.
No, we've lost him.
Come back to me.
So
yeah,
no,
George.
Breaking up. Okay, go to
try
another
this.
one. Maybe without the video.
Okay,
Yeah, it's
right
better now. So maybe I want to remind people that, is it going through? No, just power and control is an element that is intrinsically in this process. And until we deal with the problem of power and control by men keeping women under the lid, we are not going to resolve anything, either politically or religiously or anything. It's just a fact. I just wanted to insert this idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, you want to come back to me?
Come back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Eisenhower, for your talk. I noticed that you seemed reticent to or reluctant to attribute your enrollment in the LLU Bioethics program to the Lord's guidance. So I have two questions on this. First, why do you think you were reticent to make that attribution? And then secondly, do you find that because most Christians are reluctant or reticent to ascribe to God how he's leading in their lives, we are hindering people's, perhaps non-Christians' awareness of God's role and providence in the governance of the earth?
Wow, that's great. I love that. Let's see. Hesitancy on my part to ascribe God's leading to my beginning the master's program at Loma Linda. You heard me speak about it the way that I have spoken about it dozens of times in dozens of different settings, and I have adopted a one shoe fits all kind of approach for talking about that. People have been asking me, wow, bioethics, you weren't doing that before. What led you to it? And so I've come up with a generic thing that I fall back on, where I want to intimate that I felt like that I was being led by a higher power without beating people over the head with it, because there are some people for whom that would be a turnoff. So you heard me talk about it the way I just commonly do. If before I had spoken, if you had said, hey, Will, I want you to know this is a crowd that feels very comfortable with the idea that God guides us day by day and helps us find our way moving forward. I might have described it differently, but now that was part of your concern. The second part of your concern, can you restate it for me?
Oh, yes. By this reticence of expressing our view as Christians of God's leading in our lives, do we hinder other people's, non-Christians' awareness of God's role or providence in governing the earth? Now, I'll just add this so you have a context of my perspective. I have been privileged to lead a lot of good work that has affected, California policy and have global impact. I do not hesitate to say that I believe the Lord put me in that role, because I do want people to know that as a Christian, I happen to be an engineer, as a Christian, that I believe the Lord is playing a role in my life and putting me in places that I can do some good. I want them to know that.
Okay. Well, let's see. I'm in huge sympathy with everything that I hear you saying, and I very much appreciate you saying you want people to know that God guides and influences us, and so you're giving me something that I promise I will start thinking about.
Think about it, and particularly, I do not hesitate to say this as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. I specifically say that because I want people to know that here's a Christian who believes in the Bible, who is an engineer, but is attributing to God's role in his life the work that he is doing. I don't want to take away the credit. So I'm very clear about it. And so I think people's reluctance is perhaps maybe taken away, in my thinking, from the credit that people might have an appreciation for. And it doesn't matter what the audience is. I'm usually not amongst Christians.
Okay. Wow. Well, that is, you are saying some very thought-provoking things, and I really appreciate your perspective. I will be giving that a lot of thought.
Okay. Dana, you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to withdraw your hand? Is that?
Yes, we moved on.
Okay. All right. David, I've got one hand up.
I love your pink outfit. You are delightful. I don't know if it's just a fashion choice or, you support fight against cancer. Yeah, I appreciate both of them. And
you're most kind. Okay,
I was very happy to hear Dr. Eisenhower talk today, even though I do not agree with everything he said. Let me mention this. I believe we graduated together from Loma Linda on parallel programs. You know, I was on the chaplaincy program.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, David, I have one hand up, but Simona has spoken before, and maybe we should come to a termination of this part of our program.
I just want to add a couple of details that are factual.
Well,
okay, let's let, is there anyone wanting to speak after Simona?
No, no.
Okay, now I know you may need to leave for us.
Yeah,
but
I
let's go ahead.
I do. I'm going to turn it over to you. And I just want to thank Reverend Dr. Eisenhower to be here. And just great in eternity past, it was predetermined that you'd be here today.
Isn't it great? Yep, love it.
I'm still an Armenian, so but thank you for coming. David, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Forrest. Thank you. And I agree with Dana. That sweater is just stunning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Dana. I mean, Simona. Excuse me.
So when we were talking about the percent of people who support Roe v. Wade and those who don't, so let's get the numbers straight. To 2021, poll found that 60% of United States citizens support Roe v. Wade. Only about 22% of them want it gone. So we're talking about majority of people supporting. So this minority that wants to impose something else is a minority, and that this is something that can be followed through the years, and it is pretty much, and I'm pretty sure right now it's probably even higher than 60%. The second issue was about state laws and whether it can be decided democratically. There is no democratic decision made when the laws are made by people who are elected in states where voting rights are limited for specific racial groups. So people who have the most to say in certain issues like Black communities, Hispanic communities, Native Americans, and so on, are specifically their rights to vote are limited in the states that bring these laws. And finally, I have a moral question for you. Is it morally acceptable to force women to give birth? Which is basically an enslavement.
Well, that's a simple question, and I can give it a simple answer: no.
Okay, so his answer, Simona, is no. It's not right to force women to give birth. I think both.
But what I'm trying to say, David and Will, is that we can talk on a high moral ground of what it means to abolish abortion. But the real bottom line issue is that if you abolish abortion, you're forcing women to give birth. There is no question about it. And we are actually not talking about ending abortion. We are talking about ending safe abortion. So abortions will continue, but women are going to, their lives are going to be endangered and things are going to get worse. People are talking about, for example, adoption. There are about 400,000 kids every given year in foster care. Of those, about 150,000 are eligible for adoption. United States adopts about 50,000 children per year. This is our limit, has been for years and years. So what are we talking about? Who is going to adopt these kids? Second, adoption is a huge business. In 2014, it's $14 billion a year business. So we're talking about business interests, which, when somebody is talking about having sufficient supply of domestic infants, to me, that is human trafficking. So what are we talking about in real terms?
Yes, yes.
Okay, Will, if you want to respond to that, you may. If you want to say I've paid my dues and I don't want to say anymore, that's fine too.
Well, let's see. I will say I'm I think I'm pretty clear and pretty conservative on the morality of abortion. When it comes to legality, I'm much more pragmatic. I think that legality issues need to be decided based on what will, let's see, what is the wonderful phrase for it is harm reduction. On the legality issue, I'm a harm reduction person, and figuring out how can we reduce reduce harm as much as we can, given the circumstances that we find ourselves in. That's the legal challenge.
Okay, let's thank Dr. Eisenhower. When we agreed that we would do this, Will, you had no idea, neither did I, that this would be right after this Alito document surfaced.
We had no clue.
Right, and so you did not expect to be pushed quite as hard as you have been, but you have handled it well. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
All
Yeah.
right, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. It's been a treat and a pleasure, and thank you very much for having me as your guest.
Okay, now we have a digital virtual foodless potluck that follows this, that goes on for a long time, and but we will formally conclude this meeting at this point with the benediction. After the benediction, we'll turn off the recording, and the next session will go under the leadership of McKinley or whomever else the group wants to lead out. So once again, thank you, Will. Oh, one other comment. My wife said that your wife said that your wife deserves a medal for being willing to marry a man who goes from one troubled church to another troubled church.
Well, yes, that is definitely true. Yes.
Okay, here's the benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.
Thanks, Dave. Dr. Eisenhower, if you are still there before you leave,